Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Kerbal Aerospace Program. Now this is going to probably come out a little bit later than I wanted it to because we ran into a really interesting issue, or rather I ran into one. I play off of a laptop, of course. I play off of a ThinkPad 510, and there's been, I guess my hard drive's failing. So I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning to my machine beeping at me. It apparently had restarted it, and Lenovo's got this deal to where it will pop up a message saying that it can't find any boot media, or that maybe the hard drive had failed or something like that. Now, I sort of ignored that because everything sort of worked to, for the most part. That happens to me occasionally. But it turns out that this time I actually did have a rather nasty thing going on to where my home directory had basically been corrupted and we had all of these orphaned inodes. I'll tell you more about that whenever we launch this thing, and hope I've done some adjustment with Open Broadcaster. Hopefully we won't run into the mic problems because I have given myself about twice as much gain. In fact, I'm going to see maybe if I peak at this point. Hopefully not, because I'd rather not peak. I'd rather not get all the distortion. But I'm just going to go into this. I have not practiced this since the crash, but we have ourselves the Commie MkI satellite that's going to be replacing our geostationary satellites that we have here. I will be launching somewhere around maybe I don't know, 3 of them to replace them. I have a plan for the older Commie Mk I satellites that I will talk about at some point. But until then, let's just get this guy going real quick. And I'm going to turn down my volume on here just in case it is too loud on my mic. And so hopefully that will help the issues with my voice not coming through clearly on launch. So anyway, what ended up happening is that, maybe that's a little bit too steep, I ended up doing this weird thing to where I was, trying to recover. I ran the Windows recovery tool that runs check disk and everything. And there's a small problem with that. It doesn't give you any feedback. So what check disk will normally do in this situation, I do have a feeling maybe I'm a little bit too steep already. I need to pull down my thing as well. But what check disk will normally do in this situation is it'll take these orphaned inodes, so to speak, and it's not really proper to call them inodes. This isn't a Unix file system. And when you talk about inodes, you're generally talking about a file system that's rooted in some kind of Unix background or whatever, some kind of Unix progeny. Anyway, this thing comes up with no feedback. I'm sitting there, I'm beginning to get pretty irritated with it because it's not giving me any feedback. It's taking forever. Check disk moved my files into a hidden folder called found.000 that was not accessible to, my account. And so I pop into Windows after everything shows up. We are coming in a little bit steep here, by the way. I need to bring this down a bit. Maybe bring down our inclination as well. But needless to say, bring it is really annoying when that happens, and like Windows comes up and it says, I've got a temporary profile, and I'm not entirely sure why. I did some research on this, and I found out that what was happening is that basically, initially check disk have moved my home directory. I didn't really say anything about it. Let's get out our instrumentation here. And that can be, whoa, okay, that is too far. I want to be careful here. You know, I've basically done this deal to where, like, it had moved the files in my home directory because they were orphaned. And I was a little bit curious as to why this thing in particular. Yeah, there we go. I'm trying to get this thing into orbit while I'm talking, but, you know, I was curious as to why this particular issue is, you know, I had the space still being consumed on my disk. It turns out the reason for that was that we were actually, or I was actually looking at files that have been in this hidden folder that's only really accessible by the administrator, and that's not a huge problem. I mean, you generally don't want... Oh, come on. You don't want people to be able to access your files, so it did go through and, you know, change that very slightly. And I popped in to my Linux partition, and it turned out that what was happening is that this folder was hidden and that there was no way I could access it normally. So, being afraid that, you know, NTFS support on Linux is still kind of dodgy, I believe. Some writes are destructive, if I'm not mistaken, in the sense that if you're not careful, what'll end up happening here is that, we'll go ahead and exec that node as well. Are we holding maneuver prograde? Or what? I mean, we still have 8 minutes to get there. Although it looks like this is not quite doing what I wanted it to. Or maybe it is, it's just going about a roundabout way of doing it. You know, at any rate, while we're waiting for this guy to get up here, and we certainly will not wait the entire 8 minutes to do that, but gone back into Windows, tried to back it up onto my hard drive, and at this point I'm thinking, okay, what if KSP screwed up too? Like, that's really the only thing on this partition that, like, I care about. Everything else I could really not care about too much. But in this case, you know, I was lucky. So there's a lesson to be learned here, which is that you're not immune to disk failure. And I will be replacing my disk, hopefully, whenever I can afford it. Because, you know, I've got other things coming up. It won't be immediately, but a cheap disk is not going to be difficult. Now, as for what I'm doing here, we are going to go ahead and attempt to replace these satellites one by one, and they're not perfectly equatorial, or not equatorial, but I don't think they're perfectly in a geosynchronous orbit here. That's okay, I believe. What we're basically going to want to do is we're going to figure out where we are in our orbit. We're not going to intercept it immediately, with the reason being that if we do such a thing, it'll take a ton of delta V, because we'll have to catch up with it. So I'm going to get in a low orbit, at least a low enough one that it would not really matter all that much. And then I'm going to try to intercept this thing. Okay, after about a minute it looks like we're ready to burn. Or maybe not ready, but we're getting there. I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of lead time here, so that we can make any corrections that are necessary to our heading. Because we all know how the flight computer likes to give us these bizarre adjustments for minor issues. It doesn't usually take the most direct approach when dealing with heading, so that can be a problem. I'm relatively confident, though, that this is something that we can do. And I will get us up to the point to where we really will begin catching up with this thing. I think everything really is deployed on here, I believe. Let's get some targets going. I am going to decouple this. And that's good enough for me. Just slowly drift away. Except okay, that is probably not the best orbit for that. I mean, that's okay though. We'll get this guy to point retrograde, as we are pretty close here to our retrograde marker. We do have a bit of an inclination to deal with, and of course we're not in the optimal spot here. But we'll get this guy back down nonetheless. I probably could deal with reaction wheels on this. I just wanted to get far enough away. Let's get these guys set up though. We will get this guy pointing to the moon. I think it's possible for us to hit Minmus as well doing this. I've done a lot of interesting things here. You can see I've added docking ports. Oh, there we go. Ooh, get this guy down to circular, quasi-circular orbit. Very good. Let's get our descending node down. And let's tell flight computer here to point. Go ahead and point at the node. There's no reason not to. Let's do a very slight inclination change here. And then once we do that, we are going to try to get as close as we can. You can see our antennas are out. And actually, I did accidentally dupe the antennas. That's okay, though. I think that looks pretty cool. And let's execute that node. So that will take very little time at all. Unfortunately, the rendezvous deal here will not adjust our inclination very easily. But that is okay. I mean, the idea is basically we are going to take this guy up. We are about exactly where we want to be. So I'm going to kill that. I'm going to try to get a rendezvous going here. If we can get as close as we can here. Obviously, that's not the ticket. However, that is going to be pretty close for us. We'll just do that real quick. We'll do a 9-kilometer separation. We will get that burn started by burning towards the node. And then we won't try to catch up with this immediately. I mean, we got plenty of delta V though. The hardest part is probably going to be circularization. And the trouble is probably going to be that, you know what, let's bring this down a slight bit. Even though we've got a pretty straight shot there. But you know what though, I'm not that worried about it. That'll be okay, I'm thinking. I am a little bit worried that our approach is going to be a little bit too fast. But let's kill that maneuver. Make sure we're in place in orbit around Kerbin. I mean, we do have plenty of fuel in this thing. The question is going to be, are we going to have enough to deorbit eventually? I don't see the need for us to deorbit as such. But that could be something that for some reason or another we might plan to do. And so I don't want that to become too big of an issue for us. We are lagging for some inexplicable reason. I guess to make an adjustment of some kind, we might have not done so well here. I don't know what is up with my axis. But nonetheless, we will try to get this thing in orbit, and we're about where we want it to be. Except we are no longer pointing prograde. Oh, well, that is... I do not know what happened here. Okay, kill that command. We are a little bit late, which is going to be a problem for us. For some reason, point maneuver prograde has caused us to move something in the way of efficiency. We are a little bit later than intended. Inclination is probably not where it needs to be. And you can tell it's been a while for me since I've last played. But that's okay, we will get this down to the point it needs to be. We will be a little bit behind, I think. Or maybe we'll be ahead. Let's hope maneuver prograde. And hope that this does not cause us any more issues. We are still very much late on this, I think. However, our inclination is good. We'll be fine, I believe. And when we get this guy into orbit, that'll be fine as well. The main thing is that we want to get that into our 5 hours, 59 minutes, and I believe it's like 20 seconds. And that will help us out a good deal. I mean, I believe that we're probably closer than I initially thought. Our inclination is deviating a little bit quicker than I wanted it to. For all practical purposes, that does not really matter as much. But nonetheless, it probably is time for us in a little bit to kill that maneuver node and make fine adjustments. And as you can see, we are more or less coming in there about where we want to. We have about 900 there's a delta V left. And so the real question is going to be, can we catch up to this thing in a way that does not cause us to crash? Because I really wasn't expecting that direct of a shot, to be honest. I mean, this is plenty close. Well, it's about time for me to begin throttling down, I believe. See what we have here. That is going to be a little bit less than ideal. Okay, so Apoapsis could be a little bit higher. I'm going to get it to 800. Or not. And we will see you probably once I get these guys taken care of here. We are a little ahead, so I'm going to point prograde, I think. Knowing how much it's going to take us. And I'm just going to make that minor adjustment. And then we will try to get into orbit pretty soon. And I'm going to put up the other two satellites as well, so we really do not have to worry too much about this. We'll go target grade. And I think that will help us a little bit. Oh, there we go. I think that'll be good. So, I will see you when I get all these satellites deployed. And also maybe show you the graveyard orbit that we're putting this into, because when I do get some science, and I do intend to get a little bit of science this episode, we are going to possibly purchase the grabby thingy so that we can refuel those and send them on an alternate mission. So we'll be back here in a bit. So I thought I might capture re-entry real quick for the very reason that we may be in a bit of a pickle here. I'm not entirely sure of that yet. We're either going to be very close, or we'll land on top of those mountains, which will be close, but unfortunately will be disastrous for us. Although it looks like we are passing the mountains, or so it would seem at least. Maybe. It would be nice if we did, but this is a bit of a problem because this thing may have just turned into debris. Which I suspect happened. If we go to F3 here, yeah, we lost her. We happen to lose our reflectron due to aerodynamic stress. There's really nothing we can do about that. So the hope will be that maybe when we touch down, we'll be able to recover some of this. I'm not quite sure why that reflectron is breaking, because to be honest, it is in a decent spot, and had we been going slow enough, I mean, it's tucked under there, or was rather. I mean, that's part of the question. We aren't debris yet, so maybe we will recover part of this. I guess I should have preemptively put down the landing gear, however. If we can recover this as soon as it hits the ground, though, that would be nice. So I'm just going to let this get down a fair bit. I hope that maybe that engine does not break, or otherwise cause us problems. I'm beginning to think here that we will soon be popping those chutes out. And that could be a bit of a problem for us. This is part of the issue with designing an SSTO. Is it would be nice if these things survived. We're going fast enough for this to maybe be a problem. But if we're on flat enough land, then it may not be. I'm gonna hover over here and wait for the button. That is surprising that we actually survived that. And just to give you an idea of how close that one stage off of that first rocket got, I mean, we got no science off of this, but we got 96.7% of the value, which is not bad at all. Anyhow, I'm going to launch the other two satellites, and then I will keep you apprised if anything else happens. So we are coming down now for a landing with our science capsule. And as it turns out, we actually did do a number of things here. It turns out that we spent about 9 days or so in orbit. That was enough for us to complete this capsule, as I had intended to do. And so I'm sending it back in the hopes that we may get some science out of it. We somehow still have our antenna. I haven't quite figured out yet what the cause of that is and why it snaps sometimes and other times it doesn't. I mean, it claims aerodynamic stress, but I don't know how accurate that is. I had ditched at one point or another my service module, and that's something that I had trouble deciding whether or not I was going to do, because we could recover that service module, and in fact we didn't get really any re-entry heating at all. If we go here, I stand corrected. We did have just a wee bit. Well, I'm just going to land this guy and recover real quick, as that is something that I really need to look at here. And whilst we land, because it is a fairly interesting deal. I'm going to check to make sure that we are recording, and it appears that we are, even though we're, to you, the video is probably hanging and will continue to hang while Unity figures out how to unhang. Well, there we go. We are largely good for landing. Nothing is going to bring us down, except for this parachute. I wouldn't be unhappy if this parachute brought us down. But we should get some 50 science from that, and it's much needed. That will give us a fair boost. And we do need that boost because we have a lot of things we want to unlock between the next couple of episodes. 84% value, that's something I expected. You'll notice my funds are down a bit, and there's a couple of reasons for that, but before I go into that, I want to talk to you about what I've done in those 9 Kerbin days. It's been like 3 days here because I recorded this the night before, and then OBS decided to crash. Well, let's go take a look at our Commie satellites. You can see if we hover over here that they're all stacked on top of each other. And this is, in fact, deliberate. What I've decided to do here is I'm going to send a refueling mission. And these guys are either going to go to Minmus or the moon. Probably the moon, though I'm not too certain about that. Testing will reveal what I plan to do. And they're going to be orbital satellites that get local Minmus communication, or local lunar communication. But let's see, which one is this? This is 3? Maybe. Rename vessel. This is number 2. So our vessels are going to be somewhere over here. Or you know what, I can do this. There we go. This is Mark 2 over here. And this must be Mark 3. So there we go. This does give us a good view of this. You can see that these guys here are basically parked real close to each other. And they've got about the same orbital period, so they won't drift too far. The idea is that we are going to go ahead, and when we do this refueling mission, we might as well refuel in one area and not waste the fuel to get out there. And then these guys will go out to the moon and will do something that will make them easier to deal with. Probably won't put them in geosync orbit, but we'll do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and launch one of 2 satellites. One I've already launched, twice in fact, because I discovered something fairly peculiar about it. But we have these surveyor satellites. It comes in at a cost of about $7,000. Now, if I've done this correctly, this should have plenty of battery power. And why am I even mentioning that? Well, as it turns out, battery power was an issue. I had launched this previously. Better go in real quick. I'm going to recover that because I'm not too terribly sure if the batteries are on there or not. the batteries aren't on there, then that probably means that this thing isn't strutted either. But as you can probably tell, I had actually neglected to put the batteries on. That's kind of a difficult thing to do when you're trying to get out in the solar system and you get eclipsed by Kerbin. Let's see. Yeah, we have the batteries on there. I'm just going to reload that real quick. You never really can be too careful with these things because I was able to recover this, fortunately. Albeit with some problems, and what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm probably going to release a supplementary video. Of course, that's only going to be if KSP does not hang, and it looks like it has. So I will return shortly once I have a fresh instance going.